My message? John McLaughlin can take at least 2 committees at one time.
Well, yeah, first of all, you got the wrong committee. I did not apply to planning.
Oh, you're not on planning?
No.
Oh.
No, I didn't apply.
Oh.
I applied to this committee. And
Oh.
Natural, and the Historic Review Board.
Oh, okay.
However, withdrawn from the Historic Review Board.
Oh, okay.
And I'm now applying to the
Well,
Parks and Recreation.
Okay, well, Dan Holliday thought you'd applied for the planning commission, and he said he'd really like to see involved. He said I'd really like to see him involved with natural resources.
Well, I beat him to the punch, actually. I did the application.
Okay. Junk.
So you've already done the application for NRC, is that what you said?
Yep.
But you're still mayor.
Yep, that's all right.
That sounds like kind of undue influence or malfeasance in office or something. I'm not sure.
I'm not choosing myself.
What do you think?
He's,
You think
he's
so?
not. Well,
He'll be up to others.
it'll
see
be up
if-
to others to
See if he's
actually
worthy.
act on his request.
All right, Brian, we're ready to go when you are.
Okay, yeah, okay, call the meeting to order,
All right.
and looks like we have a quorum. Let's go ahead and do public announcements. Jerry, do you want to start?
Public announcements?
Well, no, public. Announce who you are.
Oh, okay, fine. So I'm Jerry Herman, and I'm going to teach us a song.
All right.
Now?
Later.
Later, yes. We get to accomplish everything we need to accomplish first, I think. Okay, I'm Brian Boyce, Chair.
Richard Craven?
Douglas D. Hart.
Ginger Redlinger?
Make sure your mics are all on.
Yeah.
It's glowing at me.
Okay, and I'm Pete Walter, staff.
Okay, is there any, let's see, I've got to get up to the top here.
Public
Okay,
comments.
any public comments?
I believe we have Mayor Neely here.
Yes. And would you like to speak?
All right. Good deal.
I wanted to thank you for your work over this last period of time. As you know, there was a natural resource committee, then there wasn't one, and there was one. And I was the one that pushed for it in the first place, and then I was the one that pushed for it in the second place. One of the major concerns I have is that to the best of my knowledge, how many positions open?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I believe we
There
have
are 4, I believe.
2 coming up for term and 2 vacancies, so we'll have 4. Yeah.
That's right.
Out of 7.
I'm the only applicant.
Wow.
Okay.
How about your wife?
Actually, this is no joking. This is not a joking matter.
Yes. it's not-
I'm very concerned that we're going to go down the road we did before.
Right.
And I don't want that to happen. I've been trying to twist Richard's arm a little bit, and might continue to do so. But the point is that it is in order to move forward, you really have to have some goals that you're willing to put forward in the next commission. The next commission is setting its goals in the first month of next year. And if there's nothing there before them, there's, some of your meetings that I'm aware of, you express frustration. Well, and sometimes frustration with staff. Well, that's not the issue. Staff's not the issue. The issue is that it's the city commission that sets the goals, and if they're not getting any input, not much is going to happen. And some of the ideas I've heard expressed here, I think are very good ideas, but we've got a process, and it has to be part of that process. So it's the reason I'm putting in an application, which probably won't be heard until next year, but. That I'm hopeful that we can pull back. I think we had some. We do still have, but I think we had some tremendous people on the committee, and for whatever reasons, they're not coming back into the application pool. One of the reasons I pulled I didn't want to serve on more than two committees. One of the reasons I pulled off of the Historic Review Board was that I think a lot of the things that you were talking about and so forth will have to be done in conjunction with the Parks and Recreation Department, and I think maybe having a seat on both might facilitate that kind of thing, assuming I get appointed by the new mayor. I think probably I'm not worried about that, but I would. I was going to say I would like some competition for the position that I'm running for, but I guess I could run for 4 different positions as it stands now because there are no other applicants.
Yes,
so,
but would that mean 4 votes? I think you'd be a quorum unto yourself at that point.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the point is, in terms of the number of individuals, if we only got 4, we only have a quorum.
Right.
Yeah, well, we do have the recommendations for the city commission on our agenda today.
Good.
And we will be talking about that, and
Yes.
we should be passing something because it's the last moment, It's
Right.
as late as we can do.
Yes.
I have not signed back on. I'm writing a book, and
I'm not criticizing any individual for not signing on.
but I'm saying where I'm at. I would be willing to serve on the committee, but not as chair in the coming period of time. But I'll have to wait till next year to sign in if I decide to do that. But that's where I'm at with it. The way I went to the computer this evening to get back to work on the book, and there was an announcement, NRC meeting. So that's how I got here.
Well, good for you.
So, and I, anyway, we do have some things to recommend, so that we will be forwarding, and we'll see how that goes.
But in any case, I thank you for all your work. I think we had a lot of good things that came through. We're a Tree City, and we. I guess some of those things that. I'm going to shut up. When you guys interview me for the position, then I can sort of talk about why I want to be there and so forth. And that was not the purpose of me coming forward at this point. Was to thank you all for your work, and I think we really have to strive hard to make sure this is a viable committee. I think it's an important one, personally.
Well, we certainly thank you for that. I mean, we know that you mean it when you say it. I have a question for you, though, if it's fair to ask you one.
It's fair to I could always not answer it,
Sure. On this exact subject of recommendations for priorities for the next biennium, as Brian said, we've developed some. We're going to discuss them and presumably adopt them, pass them out tonight. But predates me on the committee, but where we started and we developed those was to look at the last set of recommendations the committee developed and forwarded. And, maybe I'm kind of shooting off my mouth here, but as far as I could tell, those recommendations never went anywhere, or never found any traction. Do you have any guidance for us?
Well, I don't
doing something beyond just dropping our recommendations in the inbox.
Yeah, I don't recommend. I don't recommend. I don't recall we getting anything from you all for at the goal setting session in the previous goal setting sessions.
I don't think we have ever done
I
it.
think he's thinking
Well,
of
what was
other.
the draft? What was the set of recommendations you gave us that
Well-
we reviewed when we started to develop our recommendations this time?
Those were part of those were recommendations that I proposed last year. but they never went anywhere.
So the committee never finalized them,
Let-
so the
Yeah,
ball
well,
was
that
dropped
ball's-
sooner.
Let me-
I mean,
let
that's
me-
what I'm asking. I
let
mean,
me-
where are we not getting the job done?
Let me make a comment, though. We've gone into a biennial budgeting system, and we went, when I first started, we pushed that forward, which means goals are set for 2-year periods. So a year ago, there'll be a period where the commission will probably look at the goals that they had set the year before, and there may be minor tweaks and so forth. So that's what makes this so important. I mean, you get it forward at this time. I think the Parks and Recreation that came forward, or the track, came forward with some goals that they said they were pushing forward, or was it?
Park.
It was Parks and Recreation has done that, and we saw them. We don't act on them, but we saw that they were putting forward some goals this time. I think that I don't think the different bodies have actually had input into the goal formations, and PrAC decided to take that on, and this is the opportunity for you all. In some cases, things are kind of set. I mean, the Historic Review Board, in fact, is a governing board, as is the Planning Commission. That is, they do make decisions. They're appealable to the City Commission, but unless they're appealed, their decisions stand. The others are advisory boards, and so I think in general, boards don't actually set goals. Library board effectively did, and the goal was to get them to the library. But given you are a new body, I think that, that's kind of a different situation as well. But as I said, the PrAC has put forward some goals that it wants to consider coming forward. Pete, how is that going to operate, do you think, in terms of getting those goals put forward to the next body?
On conversations with Tony about this, the idea is that those will go to Tony and it'll go to David Fraser and be sent up to the City Commission that way in a timely manner. And so I had a conversation with Tony about that earlier this week. And part of that came out of what we're discussing tonight for the retreat. Recommendations, where will those go following tonight's meeting? And that's how they will approach it. So, yeah.
People can attend the goal-setting sessions, and you've got a facilitator that's there. It's their goal-setting session, but there are invites to express opinions. If you do so, and I might be there too, but if you do so, there's a limited time that they're working on, so be sure to have a focused presentation should you want to make it. I think the facilitator will permit that to happen, but they want to keep it tight because they want the commission as a whole. You got 3 new people on the. You got 3 new people on the commission, so it's a big change. They all came in together in one sense.
One of those is a returning person, at least is aware of who we were, Daphne West.
Yeah, but she was a commissioner before, but she's still new to the commission.
Correct.
Yeah. So we got 2 people who.
I want to just comment on something for a second, because Doug, you were talking about, you were looking at Richard about the things we looked at before. I go back to the beginning when Doug and I and others got together. Shaw Spady, it was your initiative to get us going, and we did that. And one of the first things we did, this a long time ago, was formed a tree subcommittee, which then came together with actual recommendations of what a tree program might look like. And then Pete went to work on Tree City USA designation and other things. And then we began, under the time that you were here, to refine that, and then worked on groves in particular, looked at Waterboard Park challenges that were there, and tried to come up with something that would be a compromise that we could forward. We did forward that recommendation, if you remember. I remember that, but I don't remember us ever having a chance to have you react to it.
Well, I don't know what might have happened there, but in terms of the public works plans at Waterboard Park, for example, and I don't know if it had to do with any input you made, but John Lewis came
Right.
forward with a plan that actually met the concerns of many of the people there, and your recommendations might have in some way influenced that process.
But they did. As a matter of fact, he came in and talked to us about what could I do to modify this, and I think we gave him some thoughts because
And that was presented to the commission.
Okay.
The commission at that time was making a decision to look elsewhere.
Right.
This is a new commission. I mean, they might want to look at those old plans and so forth. So
Right.
I can't speak to that.
But anyway, that was a particular recommendation that we made, and then how to deal with groves. We had a lot of contention within ourselves about, or do we want to talk about assemblages of trees or individuals or whatever. But we worked through that, then passed that on to you folks. And I think the only other thing that I can remember that we've worked on diligently is still continuing to tidy up the tree ordinance and then make specific recommendations if something came along, such as the beaver issues that were going on, in Clackamas Cove and other sites. And we did forward that on, but it never got heard. So,
Well, much of that happening, I think, is just the developers are supposed to come back in January. That's kind of their deadline. If they don't, then my guess is that there have been other developers that have expressed interest in that site. So if this doesn't go forward, I think part of it might have been driven by the fact that there was a plan for the site, and that it almost had to be done in conjunction with that site.
well, anyway, my point being, I was trying to frame it a little bit. Richard and I actually go back quite a ways, and you and I go way back on this committee business trying to get this thing going, is that we have had procedure. Sometimes it went someplace and sometimes it didn't. And I think what you're suggesting, it's better to formalize it now, bring it to that work session. And I've been to those work sessions before, and I think we should request a brief amount of time to make our pitch there versus just take a stab at it, because it's an entire day-long thing, right? As I recall.
Yes, it is.
So I think we as a group might want to think about making a request to have 5 minutes or whatever to discuss what our intentions for the 2015-16.
I'm sure that would be entertained. Like I said, PrAC has already come with a set of goals that'll be considered.
Right.
So you're a little bit behind in the process.
Well, by the way, we did use their PrAC's outline and form
good.
to bring us to a process that we're going to look at tonight.
And I would like to add that what we need to do is to accept that it's not going to be perfect, but
Right.
we need to let the ball go.
Yep.
We need to say, okay, this is as good as we can get it for right now. We need to hand it off and
Right.
let other people start thinking about it, and then we start working on improving it.
Good.
But that's what we need to do, and I hope that's what we do tonight, is finalize it, let it go.
Well, and I think we've made a lot of progress in the last year on getting a dialogue going with Tony and David and others about how we develop recommendations, how we forward them, who we discuss them with, and I'm hoping that all of that is going to start paying off, because at least my humble opinion is, the reason why we have trouble getting people interested in serving on this group is you got to have successes. You got to
Right,
have
absolutely.
things to show. You got to say we did this.
And there are some things you've done, though. The point is that you have accomplished some things. So, that's
Right.
important to recognize.
You don't have a copy.
Every once in a while, I've gotten the feeling as I look through some of these things that you've kind of beat up on staff. Some, staff's implementing the commission's goals,
Yeah.
right?
And the staff have been very helpful to us. Tony coming and sharing the process with us and really laying things out, what we needed to do in the 2-year timeline. That was very helpful to us. It kind of woke us up. It's like, oh.
And Tony was great. I'll tell you, the first time around, I don't really think you had that much staff support. I think, if I may be honest, I think Pete was kind of out there on a limb and trying to, with Tony devoted, he came here to many of your meetings and so forth. He wanted to see this work, and so Pete has had the support of the department on this one, which I don't think existed at the first commission. I don't want Pete to say anything. That's my observation, and it's a very different relation with the planning department now. And he I just saw him nod at Sally, but
It's all good.
yeah, it is all good. That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to respond to your comment regarding my position here. It is up in December. I understand.
This is December.
Yeah, it is December. I understand that I serve until the next person is put on the group. However, I do plan to reapply. So, in January.
Okay.
So, maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that.
Yeah, well, I heard your impassioned plea, and I heard something about a raise or something, an increase or
Oh,
something.
yeah, there'll be a percentage raise.
Yeah.
Well, the city commission gave itself one too, so we can give you one too.
But, no, I had already thought about, just going ahead and reapplying and.
Well, that's great.
see what-
I'm glad to hear that.
Good
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
But I figured, the new mayor would want to kind of maybe pick their own people, clean house or whatever.
Well, that's not what happens. No, I mean, people apply and then the mayor, when I came on, previous, and I'm not criticizing, the mayor and a staff member went through the list. And I changed that. I figured, well, the boards themselves know what they're doing. It's better for the boards to do the interview and make recommendations to the mayor. And the mayor-elect has agreed with this format. So, and I, natural resources, I'm sure he has. Well, it's not. We've been able to keep our committees pretty well. When we've lost people, other people have come forward. We've never had a superabundance of people applying for board positions. So in some cases, there have been people to select from, but we have been able to keep our boards fully functioning with full representation, and for the most part, during that period of time. And we got a lot of committees, a lot of boards, so that is saying something. Yeah.
How many boards and committees are there? 10, 11, or what?
Yeah, 10 or 11. I don't know. We've got ones, for example, that Dan Holliday is our mayor-elect, and he was here at 5 o'clock for the interviews for the library board, and then they're interviewing for the budget committee, and those are over. He did that.
There are 15.
15.
Yeah.
There are lots.
Yeah.
And
15. Wow.
the Chiefs Advisory Committee, if that's on it, that's not appointed by the mayor.
That's extra.
That's that's one. Maybe the only one that's not.
Oh.
But the others are. We have the budget committee now that meets for a couple of times every 2 years because we went to a biennial, and the other two others he talked to is our granting committees. I'll let you know this because there may be projects that you shouldn't come up with, but projects that you may wish to support. The Metro Enhancement Fund has operated on 50-cent tipping fees per ton that come in. One of my first actions when I came in mayor was to go out to the mayor of Forest Grove, which also has a transfer station. They get tipping fees, and point out that they haven't been increased since they were imposed probably 30 years ago or more. They are being increased as of next year. The full money won't be available because they come in on a monthly basis. They're going to be increased to $1. So for the Metro Enhancement projects, there will be more money available. And a lot of our restoration activities that have come in from recommendations from different groups have gotten a portion of, and sometimes a significant portion of their funding from that particular pool of money. And as I said, that's going to be doubled. So that's good news. And so that meeting met, and the other granting authority is the Oregon City Civic Improvement Trust, which is motel taxes, which has to go in for tourist-related activities. Which you're aware of both of those committees.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they're important sources for the community. Well, thank you. I mean, we would very much, I think, welcome your involvement. I think it would help what we're doing.
Okay. I got my application in, and I'll be turning in my application.
But we're going to be
Parks and
very
Recreation.
scrutinizing.
Well, it's easier to get rid of me now because you just have to have the mayor that agrees that I should go. You don't have to take me to a vote of people to get rid of me. So, should I be applied? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
We'll see you guys.
Okay.
Take
See ya.
care.
You're probably going to talk to me next month.
All right. Okay, on to new business, and the first item is election of officers.
Okay, so, let's see. We have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary to discuss, and
I'd like to
Position.
make a quick comment if I could.
sure.
Do you think that's appropriate? All I wanted to say was I feel fairly strongly about this business of committee officers, that what we ought to strive for is that every single member of the committee should serve as an officer at least once during their term. And I think that for a couple of reasons. I mean, one of them is it shares the load, it's an extra job and we ought to share it. But number two, that's the way you get every single one of us engaged in what we're trying to accomplish too, So I'm hoping that this year and in future years too, we'll do everything we can to get everybody participating.
So there are 3 spots, is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
And I've already put forward that I won't be running for chair again, and but it's up to the rest of us to volunteer to actually run for one of these positions.
I mentioned to Doug when he called me about this whole issue, I would be willing to continue as the assistant, that is the vice chair, just because of some of the projects I'm involved in.
Okay.
But with my eyesight, I can't begin to do what you guys do, especially you, Ginger, and you're a very capable person, all the rest of it. But I sing better.
It's true.
You do sing
Are you
better,
saying
there's no
the
doubt
rest
about that.
Are you saying the rest of us aren't capable, or what?
Singing?
I'm just trying to interpret what
Do we need to amend the bylaws?
Only capable people? Well, Doug, are you willing to serve as chair?
After shooting off my big mouth, I don't feel comfortable with doing that in this next year, just simply because the commitment that I have for the Coastwide Salmon Commission will pull me away from our meetings, probably
Something
3
fishy about
times
that
or so so I will miss several meetings in this next year. I'll try to tie in by phone for as many of those as I can, but I would be uncomfortable putting my hat in the ring for chair for that reason, though I'm willing to serve in another officer position for the next year. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to shoot my mouth off and then not be willing to do it, now would it? But having said that, I mean, I would be very pleased if you would entertain the idea of chairing the group for the
Well,
next
if
year.
that's the committee's wish, then I will.
That'd be good. I'd like that.
Okay, so we have one person for chair, and we have what, vice chair and secretary, correct?
So, yeah, Jerry has volunteered for vice chair, Ginger has
Yeah,
volunteered
that
for
leaves-
chair, and we have secretary.
As I say, I'd be willing to serve
Yep.
as chair, recognizing that I would have to work with another committee member to have them pick up a little slack for me,
Okay.
probably a couple of times during the year. But I would, of course, do that myself and work with that other person, if that's satisfactory to everybody.
All right.
So that sounds like a vice chair, basically,
Secretary.
our secretary, but that,
Yeah.
if you're away several meetings, though, that might not be the best either.
Yeah, there is that. That's why I'm being candid about that. I mean, I would serve in either position if you thought it was appropriate.
Well, if Jerry's going to be here and is willing to be vice chair,
Right. The reason I don't want to do secretary is I just don't think that's
Right,
within
so-
my capabilities. All
So, I
right.
mean, that sounds fine to me, staff, so, anything that can be done via email and electronically for the secretarial position is
If you think that's workable.
it's
I'm-
workable.
It was
I'm
very-
willing to do it from my standpoint.
There's always reviewing the films online,
Mhm.
you know, to take notes and
And the
whatnot.
minutes are transcribed by our minute
As time
transcriptionist. So I think you can talk to this, Ginger, but where it's been really useful and important to be, is to have a secretary who is getting the feel of the group as we're making changes to recommendations and documents that we're sending forward and to the city commission and other groups, and documenting those changes. So with staff's help, it's doable. Yep. All right.
Do we need a motion, or?
Well, let's see, let's review what we've got here. So we basically have Ginger for chair, Jerry for vice chair, and Doug for secretary. Okay, is there anyone else willing to step forward and place their life in jeopardy and run for one of these,
Step into the spirit
one of our
debate.
offices? So, okay, hearing none.
Great.
So we have a slate, and I'll just ask for any further discussion. And hearing none, in the spirit of consensus, we can just consider our slate adopted here.
Thank you.
Okay?
Congratulations, new officers.
Good deal.
We don't have to do that in 2015, which is good. Unless
Get you a special T-shirt.
I gotta finish my book so that.
you write your memoirs.
Look
All right.
What are you writing?
Oh, my dissertation.
Oh,
Yes.
Turn it into a book, and then I can go on tour. Just kidding.
Tour.
Yeah, a book tour about
Mhm.
education policy. Yeah,
Oh,
it's,
okay.
it's real. Those are yes.
I'll read yours if you'll read
Oh,
mine.
yeah. Oh.
All right.
okay, then we've got. Then we're on to basically our recommendations to the council.
Okay.
So, based on the input from our last meeting, I did some staff editing to the document that we had discussed in the November meeting. And we've got both the red line versions in front of you as well as the clean copy. And I've got it open here on the laptop, so if we can make any edits
So
here.
is the staff no tracked changes the clean copy?
Yes, that's the clean
That's what I
copy.
thought.
So I can go through that and try to explain what I was doing. I was attempting to synthesize the discussion that we had. So I think we started out with 7 items,
Hit one of
and
these, then hit document.
3 of those items had to
Then
do
you
with
got
a
the list of documents. No
recommendation.
track changes is what I'm using.
So the first one
View document.
was, providing input on natural resources
You
codes
can
or.
blow it up if you have to.
I'm fine.
And I add a little more specificity to this because we have several sections of code that actually pertain. And if those codes are considered for amendment in 2015, either through a state mandate or through a legislative process driven by the Planning Commission or the City Commission or staff, then we would, as a committee, like to recommend to the City Commission that these sections of code be evaluated and determine areas where those codes may not adequately address natural resource protection. And then identify also any public education opportunities that might arise as a result of that. So I hope I got the gist of what was being discussed. I think what we didn't know was whether there would be an opportunity in 2015. We do have a need to clean up our code. We always keep a running list of code cleanup items, and so I think we're getting to the point where we need to do that in 2015. And Tony mentioned that to the Planning Commission on Monday night. So I don't feel uncomfortable telling you that.
By the way,
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt. The Monday night thing, is that something we'll discuss? I didn't know what
It's a Planning Commission meeting,
I know,
regular.
but they were discussing groves or something? Is that?
Oh, I was going to get to that at the
That's
staff
later.
report.
Okay, I
thing.
didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
They did discuss the Heritage Tree Code as that was recommended by you all, and didn't have a lot of changes at all.
Good.
Other than to add some specificity, which
Mm-hmm.
was good. So I'll talk about that later on.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's in the hopper.
Well, a question about this one then, that,
Yeah.
and I've had this question all along.
Yeah.
And it was part of our discussion with Tony and all of that. I mean, it's kind of a chicken and the egg, this is kind of become circular. I understand if the decision is made by the city council to open one of these codes, and then you start a formal revision process.
Yeah.
But yes, we've got an opportunity to provide input into that and review it. But before that, of course, there has to be a decision by the city commission that one of these codes needs to be opened and reconsidered. Do we play any kind of role there or no?
Well, I think maybe you want to make a stronger statement if that's how you feel. If you've reviewed any one of these code sections.
So you think our role might be in this process, this time or in the future, if we think there is a particular code that's ripe for revision,
Right,
that's when we would say so?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
would need to take a look at those codes to,
Yeah, you have to
to
exactly
really
understand.
see
That's
that.
obviously what I'm thinking.
Right.
You got to look first, decide whether you think
Well,
there are big gaps or not.
There's
Yeah.
a couple of ways of approaching that. One is to just start studying them one at a time as a
Right.
group, have a presentation made on what's there, review it ourselves. It's all publicly available.
Yeah.
Right.
But
and then,
also,
yeah.
I guess this is just letting the council know that we're interested in doing that review when the time comes. But I'm thinking that we don't need to say 2015 because it might be 2016 or even later. We don't know.
Although I sure like Doug's idea about, or the concept of looking at one of these. I'd like to seriously look at 17.49 Natural Resource Overlay District, because I knew that really well when it was first adopted here. I'd like to take a look at that, and I'm wondering whether we could pick one of these, each one of us that wants to do something, if we do. That one I would pick to work on with somebody or by myself and bring back some concerns.
Maybe that's when we put in our modified work plan.
Okay.
Next time
Right.
we
Sure.
revisit it and
Yeah, that's where that
decide
was.
how we
Yes.
might do that.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
Any
a
one
very
of them
important one.
was
It's
going
a
to
very
require
important
some
one.
resources to look at and explain and educate.
Yeah.
Though I just heard a nitpicky detail come up. The exact wording here says considered for amendment in 2015. But
Right.
these recommendations are for a biennium, right?
Correct.
So shouldn't it say 2015 or 2016?
Okay.
Or
I mean,
it
just
could,
to be accurate.
Yeah.
or we could say something along the line at any time.
Well, I suppose, or even
Yeah.
at any time, but
Yeah.
but since this covers the next 2 years, I mean,
Right.
Or just, to just take out the words in 2015, and then it reads that when codes are considered for amendment, NRC will provide input.
Yep, that's
yes,
good.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, just to take out the,
You see, I don't think this really fits into a recommendation. It's a task that we're supposed to do when asked.
Okay.
And
Well, I
it's
think
not
we'll-
a
yeah.
recommendation. See, originally, the intent on this was for us to take a look at the natural resource codes or whatever, 1749,
Okay.
and then come up with some ideas on changes, modifications. So, see, this has been worked around so that, if something does occur at the city council level, then we'll make some recommendations or
No,
comments.
I think it needs to be more interactive. And,
And this is not,
Yeah.
this doesn't exactly fit a recommendation to the city council.
Right. So I guess your recommendation would be to
look at these things in 2015, 16.
You want the city council to take action to review these things.
Well, I guess what we were suggesting was short of that. We ought to be reviewing them and then
Yeah,
recommending
exactly.
which ones we think are
Right,
priorities
Yeah.
Right.
to be open for
I agree with
formal
that.
review.
Yeah.
But see, we don't need the city council approval.
No, you don't have
do
to have
that.
them
You don't need to
What
do
we-
approve that if
Well,
that's
we
what
could,
want
we
to
could do that, just like Jerry was indicating earlier,
Right.
Well, I agree.
and then come up with recommendations
Yeah.
for various changes.
Yeah, so that would be the work plan.
That would,
Yeah, I
Yes.
think the
Yeah.
operative
But-
word there
Yeah,
is
that
the
would be
first
the
sentence,
plan.
sentence one, provide input on natural resources related codes for the city, period.
Yes. Now, having said that, I don't see anything wrong with, frankly, bringing this forward, because this is partially, I mean, this whole process here is us trying to educate the new city commission on what we do and what role we play. So even if it's a little bit redundant, I don't mind reminding them
No, I see.
personally.
Yeah, no. I think that's important. But if-
okay, but
What do you want to say?
if I were sitting, on the city commission, and I was looking at this, I would say, well, okay, recommendations, what's your recommendation?
Well,
There's no recommendation here.
No,
It doesn't fit within the recommendation structure. This is a task that we do. It's not a recommendation that we do it. We do it at the, request of the council or the staff.
Would you be okay with under one, provide recommendations on natural resources related codes?
Well, if I could put this in a planning process, what you would be recommending is that whether or not there's a mandate to do it or a need, that you would like to see the city commission legislatively review, or at least you would like to see the city commission direct staff to open up these codes and review them with the intent to provide any amendments needed through a legislative process. So that's
Well,
kind of what it says, I think.
yeah, but
Yeah.
see, it seems like we should have some recommendations
Mm-hmm.
based on our independent reviews,
Yeah, sure.
at some point in time. If
Which
we
would only
see
come-
shortcomings in
yeah.
various codes. And right now, we don't see shortcomings.
Because we haven't looked.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Right, I mean,
And
Well,
so
I think,
it's not a recommendation that we're making, in my view.
Is it premature? Or?
I think it's premature.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well-
I think we leave it as it is for now, and then we go through the work next year of reviewing the codes,
yeah,
and then,
and hopefully we get it done before they actually open things up. But I was going to suggest that every 3 months we crack open one of these four.
right,
That would give us, get it done,
wonderful.
starting in January,
Okay.
or February January would have to be to get it done and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
make sure it's done. And then get some idea, read through the codes ourselves and get some idea what's
we
there.
might do it in this order too. because-
Well, you might as well. I mean,
Given
you got to do it some order, so why not,
Okay.
For instance, Roman numeral 4, outdoor lighting, we could involve Shaw in that, because
Well,
Shaw's night sky ordinance
exactly.
would fit perfectly into that. I felt like that was one of the things that we just left her hanging out there, and we couldn't get any traction on that. But I think we could now.
Well, that would be a logical addition to your work plan.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That would
Yeah,
certainly
so
work.
this could be, but the idea would be to be ready when the city does open it up. And there's been some talk that they're going to be doing that in the not too distant future. And that's, and if that's the case, then it's up to us to be in a position to comment.
And I think maybe, without getting deeply into the code, as residents of the city, living in the city, seeing development occur around you, what are your impressions of what you see? And then based on those impressions, staff will respond and say, well, this is why something that worked or didn't work a certain way. And then you can really drill down into which code section either has the problem or needs the amendment or needs the strengthening. So we don't need to worry too much about the technical aspects of revision, rather than the intent. But they're both important. Yeah.
Well, we had a Two Rivers Neighborhood Association meeting to look at the advancement of the Cove on Monday.
Right.
And the developers brought in a nice narrative of what they were going to do. And the very last part got my attention real quick, that in the case of what the entitlements that they must comply with, the things that they must get done are 5 things. And 3 of them were things that could be simply handled by one staff person in your department under a type 2 decision-making process. So I'm not saying that's wrong, but if we are to observe what we think something is supposed to be and it isn't right, it's almost too late. So I'd like to, look at these things more. The geologic overlays would be difficult, one, I think, but the other 2 or 3 are not as bad. To get our effort focused, as Ginger said, on at least some of these things and look at them. But the rationale, Richard, you wrote the rationale, and then Pete, you refined it here. I like the rationale behind each of these 3 or 4 zones of focus, because it states what we're trying to respond to.
Okay, but number 1 is not a recommendation.
No, I heard you there,
just
and I
make
also
sure-
heard Pete try to turn this into something a little more proactive,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure we're quite there, but
No,
that
no.
was making sense to me. That, I mean, what is it we want to have happen? If what we want to have happen is for the new commission to instruct its staff to start to assemble information and solicit input from citizens and its advisory groups or something like that, which would obviously include us. I mean, maybe there's a way to make that statement in a proactive way that you're actually, pointing at something to be done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you were starting to get at, I thought.
Right. Well, I think what this says is there might not be any, unless we state which code you think needs review or amendment, it might get dropped from the list entirely during the legislative process.
Oh, sure.
So by doing
and I mean,
this,
the very
yeah.
fact that the staff reviews them, I mean, the staff may review them and decide not to recommend that any of them be reopened in the next biennium. I mean, that's a possible outcome, of course.
Yeah. So, I don't know, do you have any suggestions on the language? We could,
Well,
provide input.
okay. When I wrote this originally,
Review and amend, yeah, what's the original?
the original intent,
Says,
and I can hear Shaw in the background here somewhere, was for us to be able to
yeah.
make recommendations in terms of looking at various codes, review and make recommendations to the city council. Not wait for the city council to tell us to do something, but to be proactive and take something to the city council. Now, I don't have a problem with the way this is written from the point of view that this is a task that we would do, but it does not fit into the structure of a recommendation.
But the question is, could it? I mean, how
Yeah.
would we rewrite that statement so it
Well,
was proactive?
Originally, here's kind of the way it went from my memory on this. And
No, I can read it.
At the time.
Here's what it said. It said, I think what it said, I'm not certain the Natural Resources Code or overlays similar to the Water Resources overlays is necessary. However, it would be enlightening to discuss what resources would be considered
Yes.
and how it be structured and integrated with existing codes. Well, a Natural Resources Overlay Code is a requirement, is a Goal 3 and Goal 5 requirement.
Yes.
It's required by state law, and we're in compliance with that, with this code.
Yeah.
So, does it function to protect all natural resources to the extent outside of Title III? That's the question.
Yeah.
then it said, the present codes may not protect or preserve certain natural areas in the city if those resources are not given consideration when potential development or maintenance occurs. I think what that's getting at is trees primarily. And the tree code is an explicit code that does not restrict tree cutting until development application is submitted. So you've got a opportunity for anybody who has trees on their property to legally remove trees unless there's an overlay. And that is an explicit discussion that we had with City Commission and Planning Commission. If that changes and you adopt a different type of code, you need a different structure and that sort of thing. And it has to be a discussion that you have with the entire community, including the development community, since it affects them and the developability of their land. And anybody else who might be affected. Now, we've made a decision not to regulate tree cutting on residential land, and where residentially owned land where there's a single family house on it. Those kinds of discussions are the kind of things we have to have.
Oh, that's kind of down the road in the process of considering revisions to
so that would
the
be
code.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still back here at what kind of role would we play? How do we interact with the commission and with the staff? I mean, the way a lot of these recommendations were written earlier, they were sort of written like we were advising the city commission. Well, I mean, I guess in theory we do, but in fact, I mean, after beating this to death for a year, it's fairly clear to me we aren't direct advisors to the city commission. I mean, to the degree we're direct advisors to anybody, we're direct advisors to the city staff, and they take our recommendations to the degree they agree with them and support them, and turn those into some kind of a package they would take to the city commission. So whatever we say proactively here has to be consistent with that, doesn't it?
I have a suggestion. Why don't we change the first sentence to read, number 1, review natural resource related codes and seek input from the Natural Resources Committee.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's fine. I think that's the kind of proactive thing that Pete was starting to get at too.
I'm going to write that.
Right.
I think originally the thought was that
What was the second part of that
we
sentence?
would do the
And seek
review
input from the Natural Resources Committee.
independent of the city council, and then if we found shortcomings, we would make recommendations to the city council.
And then we were,
That's-
Well, as
that's
I
what the
say, at
thought
least
is.
in the last year, all the
Yeah.
dialogue we've had has led me to believe that is not what we would do.
yeah,
We would not make recommendations to the city council that we thought one of the city codes was in it.
No, I think we can, and that's the intent. That's
Well-
what was in my mind.
Well, that's
Okay.
exactly why I brought it up, because it may or may not be anybody's intent, but that's not the process we've agreed to.
Well, and
Well,
I
sure
think the
it is.
reality is the process doesn't work the way you're talking about, Richard, even though we might like it to. It's better for us to make our recommendations to staff and then let them forward them with us.
I don't think
Right,
it's not
right.
just better. I mean, I think we've been told that's the way the system is expected to work. Now, I mean, I'm not trying to
Right.
say I have any special insight into that. I'm just saying it seems to be a fact.
Right.
We haven't been appointed as direct advisors.
No, but
to the
you
city
do,
council.
I think you would agree, I would hope, that we, in the case of the Beaver recommendation, follow the right procedures.
Well, yeah, 100%.
Okay, you know, even if it didn't have enough traction to get the job done.
Well, and that to some degree puts the weight on us to be persuasive and articulate and well supported in what we bring
Absolutely.
forward. You know,
I agree with that.
All right. So I put this on the screen behind us so you can see what I'm doing.
if I can see that
Input.
close.
We've got an extra space in it.
And it's on the track changes.
Okay.
I'll fix that.
All
There we go. Okay, so that's that one. But you can watch this on your screens as well.
Don't you capitalize natural resources committee? Just asking.
around the street
So,
here somewhere?
I don't want you to get sidetracked by this. I'm just putting it out there so you know that
Oh,
what
you
I'm
have to
doing.
switch the,
Yeah.
Oh, we switch over?
yeah, I think, there it is.
Are you happy with that one? Do you want to make any other changes to that one?
Well, okay, what changes did you make?
I took the sentence that was suggested by Ginger and wrote it here.
Because this is a recommendation to the city commission, so it's not for us to carry out, it's for them.
Okay, but you
You're
understand.
recommending that they consider it at the retreat, so
Right.
they can make a decision to provide staffing and resources and budget.
Well, see, they're not gonna provide anything, staff or budget, for that, because
Well, it
we
doesn't mean
haven't
it's
made
not.
the case.
Well,
No
but that's,
rationale.
but that's why
See,
we're
that's the
going.
whole point.
Well, the
the
whole point is
rationale
that
right
right now is the time to make recommendations to the city so that they can consider it.
Right.
And no, we don't have a long-winded explanation of why, but we need to say
Right.
that we would like to see these things
This is real
reviewed.
concise, this whole document, it's real simple.
Yes, but look at the other recommendations here. There's a rationale for doing it, and here, there's no rationale specifics for why we would do that.
How can you change it, Rick?
Well, but,
How would you
I
change
mean, if you're saying that you don't believe these codes, or they do, or they don't need changing, then state that.
Well,
But
what we're saying is they need
if
to
we're
be
not-
looked
if it's
at by us
premature,
and by the city
you know,
council.
we should just delete it until 2016. But,
I agree, those are the choices.
yeah. And then we spend 2015 going through it, and we get rid of this one.
That's what I would do,
Okay. Yeah.
because
All right. Yeah. I'm not advocating either way.
I mean, I think the other choice,
Yeah.
and it isn't clear to me which is the right answer. I mean, the
Yeah.
other choice is what we've left out so far here. I think, Pete, is the role that the city staff would play here. In other words, the city commission isn't going to ask us to do this level of review, but the city commission could ask the appropriate city staff to do it with input from the Natural Resource Committee and other advisors.
And potentially consultants.
Yeah, I mean, whoever else they choose to
Right.
work with. I mean, that would be as proactive as you could get in stating that something ought to happen in this biennium.
you know, if our rationale was something like this, over the last 2 to 3 years, the Natural Resource Committee has reviewed the codes and looked at various types of development, and we have found certain shortcomings that fail to adequately protect natural resources.
So we think you should reopen
And,
this code and this code in
for
the next
example,
biennium. Yes.
Bang, 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 you know. If we had something like that, that makes sense.
Well, why did you write this way?
I didn't write it that
I
way.
thought you wrote it this way.
No.
Let's look at what Richard wrote.
Okay, sorry.
I don't disagree with what's written there in
Right.
terms of a task that we do. I don't have a problem with that at all.
No, I understand. You're raising the question, does it even belong in our recommendations for
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
commission retreat?
Yeah.
Or do we just
Sorry.
take it on as an assignment?
So, discuss the necessity of a natural resources code for the city, was what it said.
Yeah.
Rationale. Present codes may not protect or preserve certain natural resources in the city if those resources are not given consideration when potential development and/or maintenance occurs. I'm not certain that natural resources code or overlay is necessary. However, it would be enlightening to discuss what resources would be considered and how it could be structured and integrated with existing codes.
Of course,
That-
that isn't
the
your
idea
recommendation
behind-
for action either.
The
Yeah.
idea behind that is that we discuss this.
Yes.
You know, yeah, okay.
Well,
Okay.
I guess what this, as it's written now, we're asking that the city actually take a look at that so that we can, comment on it, because we're not going to be commenting on it, as city staff has told us, until the city decides to pick it up and look at it.
Well, I agree with that. If we were asking for something, that's what we're asking for, is for
Right.
the city council to ask the city staff to look at this, so when we make a recommendation, they're listening.
Right.
I mean, that's, if we're asking for something, that's it.
Yeah, and it is true that we need to look at these laws, and we can't wait until the city picks it up and says, we're going to make a decision in the next 2 months, because we won't have time to look at it all.
So do you want to be even more explicit than that and say direct staff to review natural resources related codes in 2015? Or just say review natural resources related codes?
I don't know if we want to say they have to do it immediately, because we're not quite ready.
Okay, all right.
And we don't, you're probably more aware of where staff is on opening up all the different codes.
Yeah,
But we want to make
yeah.
sure that those are opened up when the time comes, so that we may comment on, maybe they're fine, maybe they're not,
No,
Not even
no code is
saying when
fine.
they should be opened up.
Yeah, I don't think we need to say when, because it's going to be
Yeah.
according to the city process, but they need
Yeah.
to review these plans periodically, and they're behind times.
What we
I believe.
would be saying, if we said something proactively here, is that the city council's directing the city staff to look at
Yeah.
these 4 codes during the next biennium and decide whether they should be reopened.
Yeah, I guess, directing staff
Seeking
is,
our input and the input of others.
it doesn't even need to be decided or put in there about staff, because, whatever they decide is going to require some
Well,
level of
that's how
staff.
you do
resources.
it. I understand.
Because the staff's got to develop any recommendations themselves for the city
Okay,
commission to pick up.
all right. Well,
But that still takes you back to Richard's concern, is that high enough profile that it's worth us taking up column inches to say it?
I think it's high enough profile of an item to raise their awareness that, one, they need to do it, and two, that's what we're going to be working on. And next time, we're going to come with more specific recommendations.
Yeah.
okay, we could.
And then that kind of opens it up for them. We really do recommend that you do that, because we're going to do that.
It's kind of an educational side to
It's
it,
like-
yeah.
If you want to state that in here, I think we probably need to state that sentence, that the NRC will be reviewing these codes at their regular meetings.
Right.
Yes.
right.
Yes, I think you
That would
should
be a
say
good-
that. I mean, you
yeah.
should proactively say that.
And that's
Yeah.
part of the rationale of why we're
Yeah.
recommending that they do it.
Yeah, really, part of this decision will include us saying that we're going to start looking at stuff next month, really.
Mm.
And that means coordinating with staff to have a presentation so that we get some idea what the first one is like.
Are we ready to move on?
Just about.
All right.
Well, does that help, Dick? I mean, does that make sense to you?
That's great, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
Okay, so do we want to just vote on everything together at the end, or do we want to go one item at a time? Just throwing that out there.
Everything at the end, as we make
I'd
it
say everything at the end. It
Okay.
seems like we've kind of reached a consensus on the
Okay,
first one.
so let's move on to the second one.
This is very clear. I was reading it while we were having this discussion.
Yeah, I want to show you what Richard wrote initially back here. So this one hasn't been altered much. So that's what it said. And yeah, it's pretty much the identical.
Okay, well,
Sounds like Doug has pretty much got a concept for how you do this one.
Did I hear him say that he applied for both PRAC?
That's what he said.
Well, I thought he
Right.
said Historic Review Board.
well, he
No,
was
said
considering
he
that.
pulled his name
Okay.
out of that.
Well, that would be a
for the
very
Historic
logical-
Review Board.
He'd
He
be-
said his view was that he would serve on both PRAC and the Natural Resources
that'd be a-
Committee and serve as something of a,
He's going to
Cross.
serve, hopefully, to do what we were asking to do. But
exactly.
I
That's what I say. I mean,
suspect,
essentially, he was saying that his vision is to do that.
right,
I think
exactly.
it'd be very wise to take him up
But
on that.
I think that we ought to mention it anyway,
Indeed, I agree
and
100%.
then it's going to be accomplished rather easily.
Well, yeah, that's what it looks to me like, is
Yeah.
that one is in fact going to happen.
Yeah, and that, we did think about it before Doug thought about it, so we can still make the statement. And, because I think it does need to happen, and we're lucky here. Doug is wanting to do it. So, at least that means he must be thinking something like us, right?
But it sounds like to me.
Yeah, isn't it?
Number 3,
Okay.
this is the one where there was discussion about combining a volunteer coordinator position, a natural resources trained professional, and someone who would have broad oversight by integrating between the PrAC, NRC, and Historic Review Board as well, to the extent that they're involved. Initially, it stated 3, 4, and 5, which was establish a natural resources job position for the city, calling on a broadly educated, trained, and experienced staff person to work between departments. 4 was to establish a volunteerism job position for the city, and I think the discussion was, with a limited pot of money, it's not likely that both positions could be created.
The rationale statement here reflects the broadly trained and experienced natural resource person, but doesn't express anything about volunteer capabilities, mobilization, and management capabilities.
So I combined all of these into one,
Yep.
and then underneath,
Though it does in the ABC underneath.
right, and
I
then
see
the
that. I do see
ABC
that.
talks about those 3
Right. I think,
roles.
yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I believe this person would have some advisory capacity with different city departments as needed, as well as PrAC and NRC and so on, and the Historical Review Board. I'm not as sure of how that's going to work out, but
Well, the HRB doesn't do a lot of natural resource
That'd be between
review,
or among.
but among? They might. They primarily look at, when it comes to actual landscaping as in planted landscaping, very limited oversight. They don't really get into that. But they do look at the size of landmark parcels. So if a parcel is locally designated or state or federally designated as a landmark, the size of the land parcel on which the structure sits is a consideration of the HRB. And if you're diminishing the size of that parcel, then it has to go before the Historic Review Board. So a large parcel of land with a historic structure on it that's being subdivided for new development, usually the house is preserved on a smaller parcel of land within that land division, but the size of that parcel is
The
subject to Historic Review Board as well as the structure itself. Yeah.
Item B really talks to the volunteer activity function, but specifically calls out working with the city cleanups. Now, the city cleanup program under Nancy Bush has $100,000 per year available to it, is my understanding, through her various things that she does, including code compliance, and at least $50,000 a year for cleanup
Yeah.
coordination.
I don't know.
That's what I believe is the case. Right there is a source of money if you're talking about assuming that role.
Well, it might have strings attached to it. It might not be able to be spent on staff. It might have to be spent on actual jobs and on-the-ground projects. But we can clarify that with Nancy
Okay.
and see what the situation is.
Well, I agree with this combination thing. It
Yeah.
has to probably be that way. I don't imagine it ever happened otherwise. And I do a lot of volunteer coordination, so I could.
yeah, the only complication I see is our city manager wanting a arborist, and I think
Absolutely.
this might be, I don't know if this could be tailored to where that would be taken into account
He
as
wants
well.
he wants a forester.
Yeah,
That's what-
forester.
And I just
and
don't.
this-
I don't get that personally. I mean, I don't quite get that.
Well, this is part of the politics of this.
I know.
Yeah, so that, I think that this might be a better use of city funds myself,
Yeah.
but, there may be opposition.
Yeah, I mean, we should entertain the possibility that position is the one that ultimately the city commission decides on, but I don't know what they're.
Yes, well, all we can do
Yeah.
is recommend what
Yeah.
we see.
I would just,
Yeah.
you know, I happen to know the county forester very well. And I knew all the county foresters before this current forester just took office here in the last 3 months. Dan Green was the county forester for 5 or 6 years, and they have a huge scope of managing city lands and for the purposes
And
of
forestry.
proper management and complying with the natural resource values, but also for income producing purposes. I can't imagine a forestry person in this city at this stage. You know, what would they do?
Well, I know what an arborist would do would be to provide the professional oversight needed to
Right.
rule on street tree removal.
Right.
And,
Don't you have an arborist in the Parks Department right now?
No.
Richard?
for parks, not for street trees. So we require that the adjacent property owner hire an arborist or not. And in most cases, we waive the requirement to hire an arborist if there's infrastructure damage on a sidewalk because of the cost of the sidewalk replacement is exorbitant. And we can clearly see that the issue of sidewalk replacement is frequently caused by tree roots.
Right.
So
But you put that requirement on
You
the
can-
homeowner or the property owner
you
to
put-
pay for that review.
if it's an iffy situation, but no, as a policy, we don't require the arborist report because it's been a political backlash and
Well,
Yeah,
you know,
so-
I'm going to
yeah.
go back to when Mary Palmer was, most of you don't know her, but I worked closely with her on city cleanups. I coordinated the clinic cleanups for 10 out of the 20 years they existed. And she was my volunteer liaison, and she sent me groups all the time to work with me, and then I rostered others. But that volunteer function, if it's really aggressively done, can be very meaningful. Huge amounts of resources can come in. Not just the annual cleanup, a fall cleanup. Everybody does the spring cleanup in April
Yeah.
for Saul. A fall cleanup is unheard of and should be. You know, planting related and all that.
Yeah, perhaps we should mention somewhere in here that this is a source of getting things done for the city that they're not taking advantage of at this point in time. And having someone who's dedicated to doing that
Right.
may be a great benefit, as it has been for surrounding cities.
She did one half volunteer coordination, the other half was metro enhancement compliance, which Michelle Benville now does. So Michelle's part-time too. Well, I think it's a real important thing to keep that volunteer part in there. That's, you know,
Yeah.
really important.
You know, it occurs to me that we don't know what the city manager is thinking about in terms of the definition for a forester. You know, what does that mean to him?
He,
I don't know.
he wants a certain percentage of coverage here. I've heard him talk to me about that, and Brian too.
Yeah, he's thinking in
Always
terms
talk.
of urban forest canopy and improving that and having this forester somehow help with that process happening.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's right. And
as
that's,
far as I know, that's what he's thinking.
it really is an interdisciplinary decision because you're looking at public and private land in terms of
Yes.
canopy and figuring out where your canopy's at now and where you want it to be. I think most municipalities think 40 to 45% is good, is a lot, is optimal. That's what Lake Oswego is looking at, and a few other places as well. I think we're at around 20 to 25%. So
Is that based on something from the GIS industry?
just a very rough
Yeah,
GIS big picture view.
does that just
Yeah.
include the
Yeah.
urbanized areas and not things like Newell Creek and
You know, it's a good question. I think once you factor in those open space areas, those are outside the city limit. And then so I think we're looking at within the city limit. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
But it does strike me that, I mean, and here we're getting kind of far afield from what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
But this whole business of trying to appoint a city forester now and whether that's desirable or not is, I mean, that's all about how you implement your
urban forestry policy. I mean, it seems to me like you do that after you actually revisit the whole question of urban forestry policy in Oregon City and agree what it is in the future. Then you talk about implementing it, is what I would think.
I agree.
That's a good point.
From a scientific standpoint, that would be the way you do it too. You have to decide what you want to manage for before you actually manage it, and you want to be able to measure it as well. So,
There's some assistance from outside the city on measuring it, the aerial photographs and things like that Metro's doing and so on. But that's another subject.
Richard's going to do all that. He's a GIS whiz.
Okay, so are we okay with 3 then?
I am.
I am.
Okay. Good.
The only thing I could think of is to add a little statement that for the benefit of the city that volunteers should be used, something to that effect, so that they get, that's the reason, one of the reasons we want to do this.
Put something in the rationale
Yeah.
about expanding the use of
Volunteers for the benefit of the city. I think that would be the easiest way of
It
saying
can
it.
go right before the last sentence of the
Right before this
rationale.
position, you could
Yeah.
insert another short sentence there.
Yeah.
Okay, right here. So, what do I want to say? Expand. Broadly to working. Also, this position would.
Expanding the use of volunteers for the benefit of the city.
Yeah.
I think that's fine for the benefit of the city, and I don't think I want to say to accomplish things that aren't getting done now so much as.
Well, yeah, we don't need to beat anybody over the head so
Yeah,
much as just
right.
get the idea in there.
But the idea is to benefit the city by doing this, and there's people wanting to do it right now.
Bob Roth, that was one of his biggest issues with
Yeah.
this process,
That's good.
was that we weren't able to address
That's where
really
that came
advocating.
from.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that, Richard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we on 4 now?
I think we should be. If
Okay.
Pete's done there.
I have
Okay.
a question here. I know we had this before us before. I thought we talked about expand the funding and responsibilities for nonprofit groups such as, how can we be so explicit to one group? That's my question. Are they a sanctioned group right now? Serving the city directly? I don't know.
No, they're not serving the city directly, but they're serving the city's
Right.
area
Right.
directly.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You do a lot of work too, you folks do, and want to
Yeah.
do more in the city. Collective Basin Council, it seems to me that it's very specific to one group, that's what I'm saying.
My question is, at this point, they deserve support, but is this something that the city can do if we request it?
That's why I was saying broaden it to expand the funding and responsibilities of nonprofit groups, natural resource nonprofit groups such as.
Well,
Then you're not making it explicit to one group. That's just how I feel.
Yeah,
It's
but
not as,
they're definitely a volunteer organization.
Absolutely.
And it goes along with our volunteer coordinator
agree.
idea.
I agree.
And strengthening the ability of groups like this
Okay,
to benefit the city would be positive.
right. But we're calling out one particular group, that's what I'm saying.
The reason it was called out is because it's the only watershed group in the greater Oregon City watershed.
Yeah.
It takes care of the urban growth boundary.
Okay,
And if you go down to B, I believe that
I need to
somehow
fix
there
B
needs to be
grammatically.
a better group of, a grouping of organizations or something to help support
Right.
whatever group it is.
great.
Greater Oregon City Watershed Committee or something up at Clackamas Community College or something.
Right.
There just needs to be some overall, some better organization or something. I
Well,
guess.
and the reality of that,
Right now, it's the Greater Oregon City
Right.
Watershed.
I run a group too, and I can think of 3 others that do similar work to what they're doing. I don't have the responsibilities that they do. But my point is, I agree with what you're saying, Richard. There, it would be nice if everyone would pool their efforts more, but in fact, they're all
Yeah,
competing for limited resources.
I understand, yeah. That's true.
Perhaps we could recommend that the city look into working more with nonprofits that are benefiting the city.
And
the
specify
cities.
them. I'm okay with specifying them. I'm not opposed to them.
Well, we'll never get them all down. You know,
No.
there's always a new
Well, I
one.
know.
You know.
Just generally
But-
state such as the greater. You know.
But you know, suggesting that they work with groups like
Right.
Greater Oregon City Watershed Council to
Right.
accomplish the goals of the city,
Right.
and creatively help with their funding and so on. And
Right.
there's working with these other groups,
Right.
Clackamas Community and so on,
Right.
would be beneficial, but the city of Oregon City can only negotiate with them and request that things be done.
Right.
You know, we can't really tell them to do it in a way, but it's a darn good idea for groups to work together, and they should be, and often they are nowadays.
Well, also the other thing, it implies there's already funding coming from Oregon City. There isn't, except when they apply for grants, as anybody else can.
Well, you know, it mentions, you know,
You could say advocate the expansion of funding and responsibilities for nonprofits, including the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council,
Yeah.
to broaden the ability of the city's natural resource base to be
yeah,
enhanced, whatever. I mean, I'm not opposed to them. I'm just stating, it says expand funding. There is no funding for them from us, the city, that I'm aware of, except for grants that they apply for.
right.
So, anyway, but
Well,
So
yeah,
what do you
I-
want to, what's the
I
group
think that,
feeling?
I have a suggestion.
okay.
yes,
That last part, where the the last sentence, it starts with increased funding, change to, and I'll read it more than once because I wrote it down. Increased funds from various, increased funds from various entities could be used to seek matching funds to support the GOCWC.
that's a very positive way of putting it.
Yeah. Well, matching funds is the way things are nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we
Matching
ask-
funds, and those can be anything from volunteer labor to dollars to goods.
Right.
Yeah.
And land.
And then
Well,
D
if
would
they're
be,
land only if they're set up to handle that, which I don't think they are.
I know, I didn't say that they were, just.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
and then the funding, the second one. could-
So do you want to
funding
keep
could
the
be
intro,
solved from-
you want to keep the intro sentence just the way it is, or are you willing to consider saying something to the effect of advocate the expansion of and funding responsibility for nonprofit natural resource groups such as the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council? You willing to say that?
Yes, I would be.
Okay.
If I advocate for,
And because,
here in the first sentence?
you know, you can't really say, let's help this one group, I don't think. Especially since a lot of groups need help.
What if you just say, and similar groups up here?
And, yeah, that's fine.
Right.
Sure.
We can single them out as a shining example.
Well, then
That's
they
no
are
problem.
good. They're good. They do
Oh, yeah.
good stuff.
Maybe say similar groups, similar watershed councils
Well,
within the urban growth boundary.
there's only one.
Oh, that's
other.
right, I forgot.
Yeah, there's, you know, Clackamas River Basin Council is a peripheral,
Yes.
small section of Oregon City.
Yes.
Because not very much land drains into the Clackamas from Oregon City.
So
There
you
is-
could say something about similar groups with,
I-
or
yeah.
groups with similar natural resource objectives or something like that.
Right,
After all,
right, we-
that's what we're talking about here,
Right.
not other kinds of,
There's-
there's a lot of other groups out there.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of groups. and-
We aren't advocating for necessarily.
Within the city limit or within the urban growth boundary, within the watershed?
Urban growth boundary.
Yeah, I'd say urban growth, because that's what we really have to confine
Well, that's
things
what the
to.
city's concerned
But-
with. Urban growth.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of groups that, you know, like Solve, they're perfectly willing to do projects here, but they won't unless there's cooperators, you know, people working with them to do it. And
Right.
they could get involved in a cleanup with the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council easily. And they're just one of many groups that or floating around doing projects here and there. But what we want Oregon City to do is make it more possible for those projects to happen here.
Right.
And I think B here needs to be,
Before you get down there, go back
All
up
right.
to right where you are there, whoops,
here?
on the ground. On the ground, for about the fifth, sixth sentence down, to the right, on the ground, to the right.
On the ground.
Yeah, well, it needs hyphens, on the ground,
It does?
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I suppose that's good enough.
Hyphens it is.
If not, I'm just looking down.
Yes,
Yes.
me too.
Where? I don't see it.
All right. And then B needs a pursue or seek or something in the
Yeah.
front.
Yeah, Greater Oregon City Watershed Council did get some money through Portland General Electric already, this past year, so, they're
Well, these
quite
are just
willing.
examples of,
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But it shows that it can be done, because they've done it.
Okay. Anything else? I think that's it. I think that's it.
Okay.
In terms of where this goes from here, it would just go to Tony, David Frazier, and then up to City Council, City Commission.
Need some
And I
little
think-
transmittal or something of the sort.
And I think the timing is critical
No.
here, that it,
Yes, it
it,
needs to-
Yeah, 'cause it seems like it needs to go quickly, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to
our
be.
intention here, I think we need to make this clear, is that this be something we can present in a limited fashion at the January retreat. Is that true?
Right.
In which case, we're needing this to happen this month.
Doug certainly suggested that. I didn't hear Tony earlier say that our engagement in that retreat was necessarily expected, but I think if we can create that opportunity, we should.
I think we should. I really do.
Agreed.
You know.
All right, well, I'm naming this final recommendations for City Commission retreat.
So,
Okay.
are
Final.
we ready for a motion?
Yes,
Okay. I move that we adopt the recommendations as amended tonight.
okay.
Second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion from Ginger and a second from Doug to approve the statements we've just amended and discussed. Is there any opposition or further discussion? Okay, hearing none, then by spirit of consensus, that is passed.
Good job.
Okay,
Thanks.
Doug will be proud of us.
Yeah.
Doug Neely, I
Yes,
should say.
exactly.
Okay.
We earned our honorarium.
We do deserve that. Okay, and any member reports?
I have a report here, which I'll just share with you. Send this around the horn here. There's one or two grammatical changes I wish I would have made, but that's okay. I'm involved with the Marine Board on a lot of projects that I work with youth on, and I was down at the Marine Board office this last week giving them an update on the things we
Thanks.
did for Clackamas County. This memo I sent to Scott Archer last week with the intention of letting him know the concerns I have. I'm also the chairman of what's called the Gladstone Parks and Rec Committee has formed a Lower Clackamas River Task Force to look at the loss of lands and stuff that's going on with their beaches, etc. Clackamas Park boat ramp, if you look at this map here, rudimentary map, is protruding so far out into what's left of the channel that it now touches the dotted line, which is a massive gravel accumulation of 2 years ago. The two touch. 9090 Bridge is on your left, on your right as you look at the document. Willamette River's on your left. It's about a half mile of distance involved here. Everything above the boat ramp is now building rapidly to an extreme shallow condition, less than 2 feet. That's happened in 1 year. What was left of the channel up to 9090 is now 1 to 2 feet deep. Below the ramp, because it can cut through, pour over it and scour, it's maintaining a 8-foot, 10-foot, 12-foot channel clear down the mouth. And it's doing it in a fairly precise manner because the rock bar dotted line keeps it a narrow trough. The problem is the boat ramp sitting there not being used, plus armoring it with boulders, which are kind of visible there in my little diagram, has caused the channel to stop maintaining itself. And the entire lower Clackamas below the 99E, well, at least down to that boat ramp, is going to be lost by next year. Now, I asked the Marine Board folks that I was talking to, are you aware of this? And Janine, the staff there, said, no, I'm not. But would you let Scott know? And I'll let Scott know about this. I've heard nothing. I've called a couple times, and I hope that he will respond. Because she said there's a $100,000 grant the city has to study this boat ramp. Now, tonight I went to a meeting over at Gladstone at the fire hall. These are where the dive teams gather. And there was a tour of the dive teams, the emergency response people, and so forth. They've got the greatest dive team assemblage in this part of Oregon there, believe it or not, interagency dive teams. They're talking about how bad this is, being able to get their boats up and down the Clackamas anymore to respond to emergencies on the Willamette or the Clackamas, go up or go down. And they were told that there's no intention to do anything about this for at least 2 years. I'm telling you, 2 years from now, there'll be no channel. You can walk out of Clackamas Cove now, Richard knows this, on a massive rock bar that extends within, several hundred feet of 99E. Below 99E was good navigation, and it's immediately changing. So I just want this committee to know I'm very concerned about this, and I do believe this committee at one time talked about bringing Scott to us to at least give us an update on what was going on with the ramp, because I feel like there's an environmental impact here. And if it's going to sit here for the next year and a half without any adjustments made, the loss of channel will be complete. And once it's gone, it's gone. If it can be removed at least half of it to allow the river to scour, then I think there's some hope. But I feel like, and then to top it all off is the Cove. The Cove developers are supposed to, in their DDA, due diligence agreement, deal with everything above the 99E bridge. Forget it. It will be of no value. Because whatever channel might be naturally maintaining itself and defining itself in a narrow trough right now that is maintainable because of velocity and all that is totally being affected by what's happening above the boat ramp. So I would like this committee to ask that, Scott come in or send somebody and talk to us about this, because I feel like this is a serious issue. Now there's a bigger picture here too, but this is just the latest problem. How does the committee feel?
Are you suggesting that the boat ramp is causing the problem?
Yes, I am.
Is that what
And
you're
you can
saying?
clearly see it. And those folks from the emergency dive team, interagency coalition tonight said that's exactly what's doing it. And we were told, we went to the Marine Board ourselves and asked that something be done. And the Marine Board's response was, Oregon City has the contract to study it, and they have up to 2 years to decide what to do.
I don't believe the boat ramp is causing that problem to the extent that you think it is.
Well, you can go down and look at it yourself.
Yeah.
The two touch. The boat ramp now touches the protruding gravel.
Well, I have gone down and looked at it. Between you and me in the discussion that removing that boat ramp wouldn't restore a navigable channel through the lower Clackamas.
Well, what it would do, though, is allow the river to continue to scour above it, which it can't do anymore.
Well, what it would
It's
do
like a dam.
is allow the channel to essentially follow the southern shore, which is
Well, and it's trying to do that, but what I'm saying is that, explain this to me. It is 2 feet deep above the ramp and 10 feet deep below it. That tells you there's an accumulation function going on there. And I don't care whether I'm right or wrong, but somebody needs to look at this
Well,
before.
yeah, there's material accumulating for hundreds of yards upstream
Right.
of the 99 bridge as well.
Well, but then there's a deep hole between that accumulation point. And my deal is this, okay? And I don't think I'm misspeaking here. If the dive teams, which need this navigation link, are very concerned, is that I think, forget what was done here. I think we have a need to know as a group what the intentions
Oh, I
are.
agree. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
the idea of an update is
Yeah.
great.
Right.
your expression that not having a navigable channel through the lower Clackamas is important, I agree with.
Right.
The fact that we've got substantial bank erosion going on at several places now because of all this sediment, that's important. I mean, yeah, there's some big issues here.
Right. But I guess what I'm going to tell you this, I know this area very well, and Richard, you know I know this area quite well, is that the channels that were above the boat ramp were very predictably good. And now the channel below is predictably narrower, but very good. And it will survive, I think. A hydrologist might have another take on it, but the point is something is working below the ramp and it's not working above the ramp, and massive accumulation just between the boat ramp and the bridge, just there, is occurring. That's my point.
Do you remember that presentation I gave about
Yep,
2 years ago?
I sure do.
About
I've
this
got
whole
it.
area?
Yep.
And, you know, it's not simple.
No,
No,
I
it's
agree.
not.
I agree. I
And
agree.
basically, there needs to be a hydraulic analysis from the Willamette upstream for about half a mile.
I agree
or
with
so.
you too.
Okay.
Which
Right.
is a little past
Yeah.
the opening for the cove.
And
Yeah, way past. it.
Higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, ways past
Mm.
it.
And to, you know, evaluate how to make this operate better. But the bottom line is that, you know, you've got a confined channel, you've got riprap on one side, and you've got a bridge, and you've got a depositional situation down here
Right.
because of the backwater impact.
Right, right.
You know, from the Willamette River.
I agree with all that.
It, high velocity coming down, it stops here. That's why the island is there.
Right. All right.
And,
But
you
the
know, you
fundamental issue still is that there is a channel maintaining itself very nicely.
Right, but
At
that's
this
all
point.
filling up though.
Well,
This whole thing.
okay, so, you know, whatever you'd like to do, I'm going to proceed with this because I'm
Yeah.
very concerned, and from Gladstone's standpoint, they're concerned too because of Doll Beach and what's going on over there. I think this committee is incumbent upon us to at least find out what the intentions are here.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And
Prac wants to know too.
Prac? Yeah, they probably do. And I'm not saying that he doesn't want to know, but the issue is timing. If it continues to accumulate, there will be absolutely no way to move anything down there above the boat ramp next summer.
That was actually the original condition there before all the dredging happened, is that was choked with gravel through there. And
Yeah,
there was
that's-
massive
That's
drainage
very true.
and blasting in the Willamette and
Right.
also up the
Right.
Clackamas, at least to the
Right.
cove.
Right.
You know, what was originally where that gravel bar was, like I've been saying to people, is a forested island.
Right.
I mean, there was a huge amount of gravel there
Well-
because the you know, the backwater from the tides just makes the gravel drop right there, and that continues downstream. The ramp may very well be accentuating things a little bit, but there's going to be gravel deposited there no matter what we do. But the low dredged condition of the Willamette is helping keep the Clackamas open at least to a point. And where that point falls is why we need some study, you know.
Right. Well, $100,000 exists right now, and I'm wondering if the scope of work is simply to look at what to do about the boat ramp, or is it to look at the greater opportunity of turning the boat ramp downriver, you know, downriver angle, or not having it there? I mean, that's
Well,
what I
my-
think we need to know.
My understanding of talking with Doug earlier was that they were going to look at all the different aspects of it,
Right.
because and including moving the ramp somewhere else as a possibility.
Right.
Maybe,
That's what I also heard.
you know, so, but they need to do a comprehensive job on it.
So,
And that's,
sounds like
we can encourage that to happen, you know, so say
we could request a appearance from Scott to give us
Yes.
an update in
Yeah, I think
January.
that's where to start.
you know, what their scope of study is going to be and so on.
And I do believe we did that 3 months ago. We talked about that as an idea, but it never quite happened. So maybe now is the time to do it.
Okay.
Okay. That's the end of my report.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll pass on to Richard if he'll.
I guess I don't have anything to report specifically, except that for the last 10 weeks, I've been taking an ArcGIS class at Clackamas Community College, 2 nights a week, 3 hours each night, plus just a ton of additional work. And we had I had my last presentation last night. And so basically, one thing I know is I'll never be an expert at GIS, but I am going to take the following course this next quarter also.
Oh,
Well, that makes you our expert.
Yeah, but it's just really interesting. Carl Koch is the instructor. He's been there about 10 years, and he's just really good. And he would be somebody you might want to try to get on the committee here if he's interested. And,
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
that's an interesting thought. Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
beat the bushes.
But he would. His background is geography.
Carl Kotz.
Yep. Kotze.
Yeah.
Carel. Carl. He's from South Africa.
Wow.
Oh.
Talk to him about us.
Yep.
Good.
Yep. But anyway, he might be someone that you might contact and see if you might be interested.
All right.
Okay.
We've had good luck with CCC before.
Anything,
so,
Doug?
yeah.
Well, just one quick comment. It's hardly even a report. I've got to say I very much appreciated Pete's email to us the other day about the workshop that he had attended, and it got me thinking a bit and caused me to look up some references about the process that the city of Tigard just went through in revising their tree code, and I found that really fascinating. I mean, I mean, there's somebody who's gone through the process that, some of us envision Oregon City should and probably will go through at some point, and evidently they did it fairly well, and it's won some awards and all that sort of thing, I mean, it's something that
Tigard, yeah.
pays, giving a little attention to, I think.
Yeah, I got a National Planning Award for Best Project Planning Process, and it was a long one, but it was a very thoughtful and well-regarded process. Yeah.
Would it be feasible to ask you to do a presentation to us?
Yeah, that would be
at the
nice.
next meeting, and then
Yeah.
you can project it, and do a little PowerPoint and.
Well, or maybe
Yeah, I
work
could
with
help with
Pete
that.
about that.
Sure.
I mean, probably
Yeah.
Pete's more knowledgeable than I am, and you might have some suggestions about someone else that you might want to get involved in a discussion like
Yeah.
that.
At the workshop, they had what they had was a Tigard planner who was also a certified arborist. And talking about it, and he was talking about they also had the city manager, or former city manager.
Talk about what again, Pete?
Talking about their tree code and how, the only one thing that they could agree on was they all hated it. Staff, developers, and it was like that set the groundwork. Well, what are we going to do? So they did a lot of workshops, and they did a lot of outreach and talking to people and how much they wanted to regulate and how much they wanted to incentivize.
I thought, Ryan, you and I looked at that. It was mostly incentive oriented, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The retention of their tree.
So there's
I
some,
don't recall that.
You and I were looking at that.
yeah.
Might have been Durham.
Their
Durham.
soil, they got a soil volume requirement for tree planting, which is a first.
Soil volume.
Soil volume.
What was that?
Interesting.
It allows for the longest livelihood of the tree that you ultimately plant, and rather than constraining it within a planting
Oh, I see.
area of 3 feet wide, most places just like, what's your planting strip width? Boom.
Yeah.
And without regard to how much soil volume is underneath or what the soil condition is.
Wow,
So there's some science behind it,
that's really good.
rather than some engineering.
I mean,
which is,
what jumped out to me, among other things, was, it was, innovative and evidently fairly successful, but also if one were going to review Oregon City's current tree code, you sort of look at, well, here's where they ended up and here's where we are.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the difference?
I agree.
That would be a
Yes.
good study, yeah.
So, yeah, I'd love to look into that a little more, go through that with you. And, the question did come up, well, is it working? We don't know if it's going to be working until we review it 2 years, 3 years from now and look at maybe in longer, how long are trees surviving in the areas that we're planting them, in these constrained urban areas. So that's where they want to try to maximize some of their canopy, is in the streets and the public areas, but also incentivize planting on private property. So, anybody else? Let's see. Coming up on December 16th is our Tree City USA submittal deadline. And I've got departments have all reported back. I think we're easily going to meet the minimum standards, but we've also had some good volunteer processes in the Parks Department and Public Works Departments as well this year. The other thing that we're pursuing in 2015 is a project with Friends of Trees, and I believe right now what we're going to do is kick it off on Arbor Day, and possibly looking at working with the school district with a Arbor Day event at Eastham Community Center. That's not totally solid yet, but we've talked to the facilities superintendent at the school district, and they're interested in that. And then the actual planting projects would be concentrating on the Barkley Hills and McLaughlin neighborhoods at first. Reason for that being that some of the larger planting strips in the city are in those neighborhoods. And there's also a need for some additional street trees. But the way that Friends of Trees works is very proactively training up selected volunteers in those neighborhoods, and then using a process of outreach, they get willing property owners to agree to purchase a tree at a cut price in their planting strips, and then they get volunteer groups to come and plant them starting in November of 2015. So this has been done in Oregon City once before, I believe in the 90s, and it hasn't been done since. So they're looking at expanding beyond Portland again, and they have an outreach coordinator who's wanting to do that. And we would be leveraging some monies from the city manager's Big Tree program, which is a $50,000 a year project of budgeting for large tree plantings.
How large is large?
Well, as large as we can. Based on survivability, obviously, there's some site considerations, but we'd like to try to get in public lands and bigger planting spaces a minimum 3 to 4 inch caliper trees. And then
And that's what you're asking for a private landowner potentially to pay for, or?
No, I mean, there would be a pretty good amount of the money for this would be coming from the city and matching from the Friends of Trees program. And
Who provides that matching? I'm sorry, I'm not trying.
Well, the city has got some monies to match, and Friends of Trees has money as well. And so the cost to the homeowner of these trees, I think, is on par about $30 to $50 a tree. So it's pretty good. And
is this the $50,000 the city has available per year that I heard the administrator talk about?
Right.
Okay, David.
Yeah.
So
and that's not in the planning department, but it's available for.
It's not in the planning department?
No, I mean, it's administered through a separate fund.
Okay.
It's not in our fund.
So that's available to purchase oversized trees if the homeowner will match it on.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about $300 trees, right?
Well, street trees, it would be dependent
size.
on, like I said, right tree, right place. So potentially it has to come off our street tree list in those situations. But bigger species in parks and open space areas are potential, and those don't necessarily have to be on the street tree list. Big natives and
well, 99E, the plantings going in there are 4 inch caliper trees, and those are $300 trees.
Yeah,
each one.
they're spendy.
Yep.
So,
They can be more than that even, so depending on
Yeah.
the tree.
so, interesting.
Yep.
That sounds like a good project.
I didn't mean to
Go
change
ahead.
subject, but what happened regarding the canopy discussion with the planning commission? I
Oh,
couldn't
right.
go that
That's what I
night.
report back on. So the only suggested edit to the NRC code was to specify that other trees could be nominated as heritage trees than the ones that are on the little chart. You know, they talk about eligibility of certain species.
Oh, you mean the one of the native trees?
Yeah, well, there were natives, and then we had a broadleaf category. Any broadleaf at a certain diameter could be nominated, and any coniferous tree of a certain diameter could be nominated. But somebody said, well, what if I have an apple tree, a heritage apple tree?
That's a broadleaf.
Well, that's what I said.
Yeah.
I was like, that's technically we could call that broadleaf, but it says in particular,
Well,
so there's room for that, and they
I
just wanted to
suppose
specify.
Someone could have a giant Mediterranean fan palm, because they do grow here.
As long as it's not invasive.
A heritage fan palm.
Well, I used to think they were Mexican fan palms, but they're
Right.
the European ones, and I did see a 3-story one in northeast Portland.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
they
we
do
went
survive
through
here.
Wow.
We went through the criteria in detail and talked about the process we went through to amend that and all the various derivations. They asked to see the final redlined version so they compare them.
Yeah.
And so I sent that along to those guys, but no other changes.
Okay. So this is just their chance to see.
Yeah,
roads
it's
and-
not a. Normally, this goes straight to the city commission. We're just apprising the planning commission of it. It's not a land use code. It's a public tree code. So,
Okay.
but the last time when the heritage tree process got adopted, it did go to the planning commission again because it was part of a legislative review of a whole bunch of other code, which was zoning and planning related. So, we just kind of sent it to them as an informational item, but they did suggest a few items. So the idea would be sending that up to the new city commission as soon as we have time, which I think the first formal city commission, other than the swearing in, is the second meeting in January. They are going to have their first meeting in January for swearing in and ceremonial things of that nature. Not a lot of business. So thank you. It's
Thank you.
finally
Thanks,
making
Richard.
its way up there.
I hope we weren't in trouble not being there on Monday. I
Oh.
was going to try to go, but I was going to call you. I forgot about it.
No, it was not.
Doug talked to me about it, and I just
Mhm.
couldn't make it work.
No, I think it was useful for them. I would like to express on the part of Damon Mabey in particular how happy he was with the process that you guys went through, and
Oh,
said thank
good.
you very much. It's great to see this be amended in this way. So, yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks. That's
I've
all
got
I
one
have.
other
Yeah.
comment, actually.
Mm.
I should have mentioned earlier on the scattering canyon that you and I
Yeah.
talked about a
Oh,
while back.
yeah.
Over in Mountain View Cemetery,
Right.
that area behind the mausoleum that's eroding.
Mhm.
I think Rita Baker is actively pursuing funding for that.
I spoke to her today.
Okay, and
About
we have
that.
some engineering plans that are kind of half there,
Yeah.
to a certain degree, so. And we talked to John Lewis and Martin last week,
Mm-hmm.
Friday, I guess. And so basically, we're kind of moving along, I think.
Yeah, actually, Richard, I think because of the scale of it and the amount of cut and fill, and the potential that it's draining an area of approximately 30 acres above it, it really is like a storm,
Yes.
what do I want to say, stormwater quality
Yeah.
project rather
Detention
than just an
pond.
upland restoration planning project. So
Yeah.
we are going to review it as an NROD application,
Okay.
as a type 2. So we decided that today.
Okay.
And that means that I think come January, we potentially want to bring that before you and discuss it as a group. But that sounds like it would be a good project. I understand there's various iterations of what it could be. But there's a lot of erosion going on behind the mausoleum because the rift drains from the mausoleum go straight out into it. And then there's no armored protection for the storm drainage that goes into it, so they'd be doing that, and then it is a sort of a tiered rain garden swale type thing with stages that would be planted, so.
Roughly 200 feet long, somewhere.
200?
I think so,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Is this the area where there was some canyon illegal fill some time ago? Real
I
close by
believe
to-
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some fill. I didn't know.
Yeah,
You know,
I
if it
remember
was
that a
illegal
long
or
time
not.
ago.
But,
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the questions, actually.
yeah.
I know all about
Phil,
that.
what-
I know all about that.
Yeah.
That was
And,
when you were doing that consulting work and you had to get rid of that soil, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's where he put it, yeah.
And there is a wetland there on the 1999 inventory, so there has to be a delineation to see whether that's still there or not. Yeah.
Oh.
And if it has wetland-like conditions or not, and if it's just an intermittent stream, then
Yeah.
where's the ordinary high water mark at the top of bank? And then the buffer that is required is put on the mitigation plan. So, yeah.
Where was the wetland?
It's
I
a
don't recall
funny little
seeing that
blob,
there.
kind of an isolated little brown
Yeah.
blob on the left side. If you're looking at the mausoleum cluster, where the building is, it's kind of to the bottom left on the map.
Across the road, though, you mean,
Yeah.
from the mausoleum?
Yeah.
I mean, after you go through that first,
And those-
that first steep area out of the culvert, then there's a bench there. Is that the area you mean?
Well, I wouldn't put a lot of validity on what's on the GIS. You know, those things are often not accurate, but they're what's adopted at this, and that GIS layer is adopted. So, where it is, I mean, I assume at the point that it was inventoried, it could have been from the National Wetland Inventory. So it could have been older than 1999, potentially, that little blob.
Well,
I don't know.
I actually worked for the company that did that. The
Okay.
Local wetland inventory is what it was.
The Shapiro.
Shapiro, yeah, Shapiro and Associates, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, it's based on, you know,
Oh, you looked at those
the
data
Fish
sheets.
and Wildlife Service
Right.
stuff, but some ground truthing also.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
no wetland delineations were ever done for that.
yeah,
You know, it's just it looks like it could be.
okay. All right, well,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, the thing I'd look at too is that often those little benches are things that drop down, didn't fully become a landslide, but they're very unstable. And that should be looked at along with, you know, what the possibilities to do are,
It
because
is, you're right. It's in the-
theoretically, if you add a lot of moisture in a rain garden, holding it there, that it could restart the landslide theoretically.
Right,
But,
and it is,
but
a-
will it or won't it, you know, so.
it is a geologic hazard overlay as well as
Yeah.
a natural
Yeah.
resource overlay.
That's probably the
so-
very reason for it, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Anything more?
If you'd like to attempt this.
Oh, you want
little
to
thing,
sing, that's right.
I know, I'll teach it to you. You can decide yourselves. We don't have to have this as an official issue, obviously. But
Do we want to
just
join first?
in
or-
1938, WPA
Just-
work songs
Is
were.
this?
If I
should
adjourn, we can
our
adjourn.
meeting
All right,
first
you
so
adjourn.
we can-
Okay, we are adjourned.
All right.
We can stop the tapes.